I watched the smartest man alive get an answer wrong, not a small mistake, a complete miss. He walked right past something I could see clearly. That's when I realized his brain worked differently than mine, not better, not worse, different. His name was John von Neumann. And what I learned from watching him changed how I think about intelligence forever. Let me tell you what I saw. Let me take you back to Los Alamos. Los Alamos, 1944, we were building the atomic bomb in the middle of the New Mexico desert. I was 26 years old, a nobody. I had just finished my PhD, and suddenly I was surrounded by the greatest minds in physics. Oppenheimer ran the whole operation. Fermi was there, the man who built the first nuclear reactor. Bethe led the theoretical division. Bohr flew in from Denmark. These weren't just smart people. These were the people who invented modern physics. And then there was Johnny. Von Neumann wasn't like the other great men. They were serious, intense. Oppenheimer had that haunted look, like he was carrying the weight of the world. Fermi was quiet and methodical. Bohr was old and grave. Johnny was warm, funny. He threw parties that lasted until morning. He told dirty jokes in 4 languages. He drove too fast. He lived too well. His house in Princeton was legendary. Scientists would fly in just for his parties. And he wore 3-piece suits, everywhere, even hiking in the canyons. The rest of us were in t-shirts, sweating in the desert heat. Johnny looked like he was going to a board meeting. I thought it was hilarious. On Sundays, a group of us would walk through the red rocks. Me, Johnny, Bethe, Bacher, we would hike for hours talking about physics, about mathematics, about the bomb, about what it all meant. That's when I really got to observe him, to watch his mind work up close. Johnny solved it in 10 seconds one afternoon. We were discussing a calculation problem. Something to do with the implosion design. The math was messy. We needed to figure out how shock waves would behave inside the plutonium core. I don't remember the exact details. What I remember is what happened next. We were all thinking out loud, trying different approaches, getting stuck, starting over. Johnny went quiet for maybe 10 seconds. Then he gave us the answer, the full solution, every step. He just spoke it out loud, like he was reading from a page that only he could see. He had done the entire calculation in his head. While we were still trying to set up the problem, he had already solved it. I turned to Bethe. Bethe just shook his head and smiled, like this was normal, like this happened every day. It did happen every day. That was the thing. You couldn't surprise Bethe with Johnny's abilities anymore. He had seen too much. None of them had a mind like his. You have to understand what Johnny's mind was like. Because this wasn't ordinary intelligence. This was something else. Eugene Wigner won the Nobel Prize in Physics. He knew everyone, Einstein, Heisenberg, Dirac, Planck. The greatest physicists of the 20th century were his colleagues and friends. Years later, Wigner said something I never forgot. He said, "I have known a great many intelligent people in my life. I knew Max Planck. I knew Werner Heisenberg. Paul Dirac was my brother. In law, Leo Szilard and Edward Teller have been among my closest friends. And Albert Einstein was a good friend too." Then he said, "But none of them had a mind as quick and acute as John von Neumann." I have often remarked this in the presence of those men, and no one ever disputed me. Think about that. Wigner said this in front of Einstein, in front of Heisenberg. None of them argued. They knew it was true. Hans Bethe, my mentor, once said Johnny's brain might be an emergent organ, of a different order of complexity than ordinary mortals. He wasn't joking. Bethe was a serious man. He didn't exaggerate. What a 6-year-old Johnny could do. Let me tell you what Johnny could do. When he was 6 years old, He could divide two 8-digit numbers in his head, not on paper. He could joke in ancient Greek with his father's dinner guests. By 8, he had mastered calculus. By 12, he had read a 46-volume world history series and remembered all of it. Every name, every date, every battle. His math tutor, a man named Shigo, came to the von Neumann house for their first lesson when Johnny was 15. Shigo was a professional mathematician, a university professor. After that session, Shigo went home to his wife and cried. Not because it went badly, but because he had never seen anything like this boy's mind. Johnny could memorize phone books. Entire phone books. Years later, you could quiz him on any name, any number. He would give you the answer and tell you exactly where it appeared on the page. At RAND, the military think tank in California, they paid Johnny a full monthly salary, but not for full-time work. The contract said they were paying for the time he spent shaving. They wanted whatever scraps of thought came to him while he looked in the mirror each morning. That's how valuable his idle moments were. Rand paid him to shave one day at RAND. Some researchers came to Johnny with a problem. A hard problem. They needed to design a cutting-edge computer to solve it. They gave him a 2-hour presentation. Charts, tables, blackboard after blackboard of equations. They explained every detail. Johnny sat there the whole time with his head in his hands. Silent, still. When they finished, he stared blankly for a while. One colleague said he looked like his mind had slipped his face out of gear. Then Johnny spoke. "Gentlemen," he said, "you do not need the computer. I have the answer." He had solved the entire thing in his head. While they were still explaining the problem, so here's what puzzled me. I think in pictures. Johnny didn't. I was not as fast as Johnny. Nobody was. My brain didn't work like his. I couldn't hold an infinite calculation in my head. I couldn't memorize phone books. I couldn't recite entire books word for word years after reading them once. But sometimes I could see things he missed. I think in pictures, always have. When I look at equations, I see colors. The letter J is light tan. The letter N is slightly violet, bluish. The letter X is dark brown. I don't know why. It's not something I chose. It's not something I learned. It's just how my brain works. When my father taught me about dinosaurs as a boy, I didn't just learn the names. I saw them. I imagined them moving through the forest, their massive feet shaking the ground. That's how I made them real to myself. Physics works the same way for me. When I think about an electron meeting a positron, I don't just manipulate symbols. I see the particles. I watch them move in my head. I see the little arrows pointing this way and that. I draw little pictures, little diagrams, and the pictures tell me what's happening. They tell me things the equations don't say directly. That's why I invented those diagrams, the ones they call Feynman diagrams now. They weren't a teaching tool. They weren't a simplification for students. They were how I actually thought. I just drew what I saw in my head. Johnny was the opposite. He thought in pure symbols, pure logic, no pictures, no colors, just an endless manipulation of abstract mathematical objects, faster than anyone could follow. His mind was pure calculation. Stan Ulam, who worked closely with Johnny for years, said his mind was like a machine with gears, machined to mesh accurately to 1,000th of an inch. But Ulam noticed something else, something that surprised me when I heard it. Johnny seemed to think he lacked the gift for seemingly irrational proofs and theorems or intuitive insights. The fastest mind in the world, the most powerful calculator who ever lived, and he doubted himself. He thought he would be forgotten. Here's what really surprised me. Johnny told people, privately, that he would be forgotten. He said Kurt Gödel would be remembered alongside Pythagoras, but not him, not Johnny von Neumann, Think about that. Think about everything von Neumann did. He invented game theory, the whole field, the mathematics of strategy that now runs economics, politics, military planning, and artificial intelligence. He built the mathematical foundations of quantum mechanics. Before him, quantum theory was a mess of brilliant intuitions, and he made it rigorous. He designed the architecture that runs inside every computer you've ever used, the von Neumann architecture. Every laptop, every phone, every server, all of them use the design he created. That's not a small footnote in history. That's 3 separate revolutions. Any one of them would make a career legendary. But Johnny looked at his own work and saw something missing. He saw that he hadn't discovered certain ideas that others had, ideas he was more than capable of discovering. He could have proved Gödel's incompleteness theorems. He had all the tools. He was working on the same problems, but someone else got there first. And that haunted him. Ulam said Johnny was not convinced of the importance of much of his own work. He only took pleasure in it when he found some clever technical trick. The broad significance of what he'd done, he seemed blind to it. The man who everyone else considered the greatest mind of the century thought he wasn't creative enough. Wigner said something else about Johnny, something that helps explain this. After praising his speed, his quickness, his razor-sharp mind, Wigner added a qualification. But Einstein's understanding was deeper even than von Neumann's. His mind was both more penetrating and more original. Wigner continued, Einstein took an extraordinary pleasure in invention. 2 of his greatest inventions are the special and general theories of relativity, and for all of Janksi's brilliance, he never produced anything as original. This is what Johnny saw in himself. He knew he was fast. He knew he could calculate anything. But he looked at Einstein, at Gödel, at the people who had invented entirely new ways of thinking, and he felt he didn't belong in their company. He was wrong, of course, but that's not how he saw it. His last words were in Hungarian. Johnny died in 1957. Cancer, he was only 53. The last months of his life were hard. The cancer spread to his brain. Von Neumann, who could calculate infinite series in seconds, could no longer remember basic mathematics. The universe does not care how smart you are. Near the end, his mind was failing. The sedatives and the pain had taken most of what made him who he was. The military posted guards outside his hospital room. They were afraid he might babble classified secrets about nuclear weapons. Even dying, he was considered a security risk. That is how much he knew. But Johnny did not speak in English anymore. He spoke in Hungarian, the language of his childhood, the language his mother had used when he was a little boy in Budapest, before all of this. Before Princeton, before Los Alamos, before the computers and the bombs, and when his brother sat beside him, Johnny recited Goethe's Faust. From memory, the whole thing, word for word, even at the end, that mind was still working. Here's what I learned from watching John von Neumann. There's no single way to be a genius. There is no single way to be a genius. Some people go straight through problems. They are so fast, so powerful, they do not need shortcuts. They can hold entire systems in their heads while the rest of us struggle to keep track of the pieces. That was Johnny, a human computer before computers existed. Other people see around problems. They find the trick, the elegant path, the picture that makes everything clear. They ask questions nobody else thinks to ask. That's how I work. Neither way is better. Both are necessary. Science needs both. The world needs both. The people who ask, why does this work? And the people who ask, how do I make this work? Johnny could do things I could not. I could do things he could not. and both of us looked at the other and wondered how they did it. And here is the other thing, the thing that matters most. Even the most powerful mind I ever encountered thought he was not good enough. The man who everyone else considered superhuman looked in the mirror and saw his limitations. He saw the discoveries he had not made, the insights that had gone to someone else, the ideas he could have had, if only he had thought a little differently. If von Neumann could feel that way, maybe the rest of us can stop being so hard on ourselves. Maybe there is no level of achievement that makes the doubt go away. Maybe the doubt is just part of thinking, part of caring about what you do, part of wanting to do better. The people who never doubt themselves are the ones who have stopped trying. Johnny never stopped trying. Even when his brain could outrun everyone else's, he was still reaching for something more. Johnny von Neumann's brain was not human. Everyone who met him agreed on that. But his insecurities were deeply, painfully human. And maybe that is the most important thing I learned from him. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe. I tell stories like this about the real lives of the scientists who changed our world. I'll see you in the next one.